Captain Sarah Chun stared at the holographic display floating above her command console, her coffee growing cold as she processed what she was seeing. The massive alien vessel had appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system 3 days ago, and now it hung motionless near Jupiter like a sleeping giant. Still no response to our communications, Captain, reported Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. His voice carried the tension that had gripped the entire bridge crew since the first detection. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. The ship was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Its surface seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, and its size dwarfed even Earth's largest space stations. Conservative estimates put it at nearly 50 kilometers in length. Dr. Reeves, what's your analysis? Sarah asked, turning to the expedition's lead xenobiologist. Dr. Elena Reeves pushed her glasses up her nose and consulted her tablet. The energy signatures are fascinating, Captain. Whatever technology they're using is far beyond our current understanding. But there's something else. She paused, looking uncertain. The ship's design, it's almost primitive in some ways. Functional, yes, but lacking the elegance we'd expect from a truly advanced civilization. Before Sarah could respond, the communications console erupted in a cascade of lights and sounds. Martinez's hands flew across the controls, his face a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Captain, we're receiving a transmission, he announced. It's in English. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Put it through. The bridge fell silent as a deep, melodious voice filled the air. The accent was strange, almost archaic, but the words were unmistakably clear. Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Valdrani Empire, representatives of the Galactic Council. We have come to assess your species for potential inclusion in our Confederation of Worlds. Sarah exchanged glances with her senior officers before responding. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Prometheus. Welcome to our solar system. We're honored by your presence and eager to establish peaceful relations. There was a long pause before the alien voice returned, and when it did, there was something different in its tone. Amusement, perhaps, or condescension. Captain Chun, your enthusiasm is refreshing. However, you must understand that membership in the Galactic Council is not automatic. Your species must demonstrate certain qualities before such an honor can be bestowed. What qualities would those be? Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite the patronizing tone. Maturity, primarily. Wisdom, the ability to think beyond your small world and immediate needs. From our preliminary observations, humans appear to be a young species, recently emerged from your caves and still prone to tribal conflicts. You have barely begun to explore your own star system, let alone venture beyond it. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, whispering urgently to Sarah. Captain, their assumptions about our development are completely wrong. Based on what they're saying, they don't seem to understand our actual history or capabilities. Sarah nodded slightly, then spoke into the communicator. We appreciate your perspective, but perhaps there are things about humanity that might surprise you. Would you be willing to meet in person to discuss this further? Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a note of barely concealed boredom. Very well. We will send a delegation to your vessel. However, understand that this is merely a formality. Based on our scans, your technology is crude, your social structures primitive. But the Council requires proper documentation of all species encountered. We look forward to meeting you, Sarah replied, though she could feel her jaw clenching at the continued insults. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Sarah turned to her crew, noting the mixture of excitement and indignation on their faces. All right, people, we're about to make first contact with an alien species. They clearly don't think much of us, but that might work to our advantage. Dr. Reeves, I want you to prepare a presentation about human history and achievements. Focus on things they might not expect. What kind of things, Captain? Dr. Reeves asked. Sarah smiled grimly. Everything they think we're not capable of. Our art, our science, our philosophy, and especially our age as a species. I have a feeling they've made some very incorrect assumptions about humanity. 2 hours later, the alien shuttle approached the Prometheus. It was sleek and beautiful, its hull reflecting starlight like liquid mercury. As it docked with their ship, Sarah couldn't help but notice that while the technology was clearly advanced, the design principles weren't as alien as she might have expected. The airlock cycled, and 3 figures emerged into the docking bay. Sarah and her delegation were waiting, dressed in their formal uniforms and trying to project confidence despite the momentous nature of the occasion. The aliens were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. Their clothing was elaborate and ornate, suggesting a culture that valued ceremony and status. The leader, a female with intricate silver markings on her face, stepped forward with an air of barely concealed superiority. "I am High Counselor Zarath of the Valdrani Empire," she announced, her voice carrying the same condescending tone they had heard over the communications. "These are my advisors, Scholar Veltar and Military Assessor Krindar." Sarah stepped forward and executed a respectful bow. "I'm Captain Sarah Chun. Thank you for coming aboard our ship. We've prepared a briefing room where we can discuss our species and perhaps learn about yours as well." Zarath nodded regally, as if granting permission for the meeting to proceed. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Sarah noticed the aliens examining everything with the air of adults humoring children by looking at their finger paintings. The briefing room had been prepared with humanity's best technology on display. Holographic projectors showed Earth from space, rotating slowly to display the planet's beauty. Other displays showed examples of human art, architecture, and scientific achievements. "Please, be seated," Sarah offered, gesturing to the conference table. The aliens sat with careful dignity, and Zarath folded her hands before speaking. "Captain Chun, before we begin, allow me to explain why we are here. The galaxy is a dangerous place for young species. Without guidance, primitive civilizations often destroy themselves through war, environmental destruction, or technological accidents. The Galactic Council exists to prevent such tragedies." "That sounds like a noble mission," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Indeed. However, membership in the Council requires a species to demonstrate true maturity. This means achieving certain technological milestones, developing stable social structures, and, most importantly, showing wisdom in the use of power." Scholar Veltar leaned forward, consulting a device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a crystal. "Our preliminary scans of your species indicate that you are approximately 10,000 years old as a civilization. You have recently developed space flight and primitive computers. Your social structures are fragmented into competing tribal groups you call nations. In short, you are typical of young species we encounter." Dr. Reeves cleared her throat. "With respect, Scholar Veltar, I think there may be some misunderstanding about human civilization. Our species is considerably older and more complex than your scans might indicate." Zarath's expression suggested polite disbelief. "Dr. Reeves, is it? Please understand, we have scanned thousands of species throughout the galaxy. The patterns are quite consistent. Young species always believe themselves to be more advanced than they actually are." Sarah felt her patience beginning to fray, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. "Perhaps we could share some information about our history and let you judge for yourselves?" "By all means," Zarath said with the tone of an adult agreeing to listen to a child's story. Dr. Reeves activated the holographic display, and images of human achievements began to flow across the room. Ancient temples and monuments, works of art spanning millennia, scientific discoveries that had shaped understanding of the universe. Human civilization spans approximately 12,000 years of recorded history, Dr. Reeves began. However, our species itself is much older. Archaeological evidence suggests that anatomically modern humans have existed for over 200,000 years. Scholar Veltar looked up from his device with obvious skepticism. "Dr. Reeves, while we appreciate your enthusiasm for your species' accomplishments, 200,000 years is impossible for a species at your technological level. Advanced civilizations rarely maintain stable populations for more than 50,000 years before transcending to higher forms of existence or destroying themselves. And yet, here we are," Sarah said quietly. The presentation continued, showing the rise and fall of countless human civilizations, the gradual accumulation of knowledge, the slow but steady progress toward understanding the universe. The aliens watched with polite attention, but Sarah could see they weren't really taking it seriously. Impressive mythology, Zara-TH commented when the presentation concluded. Many young species create elaborate historical narratives to explain their origins. However, our scans clearly show that your oldest structures date back only 10,000 years at most. Dr. Reeves frowned. What exactly are your scans detecting? Energy signatures, primarily. Military assessor Krindar spoke for the first time, his voice gruff and practical. Advanced technologies leave distinctive traces in the quantum field. Your planet shows clear evidence of recent technological development, but nothing suggesting an ancient civilization. Of course not, Dr. Reeves said, suddenly understanding. You're looking for energy signatures from advanced technology. But humans develop differently than you might expect. How so? Scholar Veltar asked, genuine curiosity finally entering his voice. We didn't skip steps, Sarah explained. We didn't jump straight from primitive tools to energy weapons. We built everything gradually, layer by layer. Our oldest monuments were built with muscle power, ingenuity, and time. Lots of time. For the first time since the meeting began, the aliens looked uncertain. Zara-TH exchanged glances with her advisors before speaking. You're claiming that your species achieved monumental architecture without advanced technology? That seems inefficient. Inefficient, perhaps, Sarah agreed. But thorough. We learned every step along the way. We made mistakes, recovered from them, and kept building on what we learned. Dr. Reeves pulled up another display, this one showing the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, and dozens of other ancient monuments. These structures have stood for thousands of years, built with techniques that modern humans still struggle to fully understand. They represent the accumulation of generations of knowledge and skill. But without energy weapons, how did you survive as a species? Krindar asked, his military mind struggling with the concept. The galaxy is filled with threats. Natural disasters, hostile species, cosmic phenomena. Young civilizations need advanced defenses to survive. Sarah smiled. We adapted. We learned. We survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and plagues that wiped out most other life on our planet. We didn't survive because we were the strongest or the most technologically advanced. We survived because we were stubborn, creative, and willing to work together when we had to. The room fell silent as the aliens absorbed this information. Finally, Zara-TH spoke, and, for the first time, her voice carried a note of uncertainty. Captain Chun, what you're describing is unusual. Most species either develop advanced technology quickly and join the galactic community, or they destroy themselves through their own aggression. A species that survives for hundreds of thousands of years while developing slowly is unprecedented in our experience. Maybe, Sarah said quietly, it's because we're not a young species learning to crawl. Maybe we're an old species that chose to walk carefully. Scholar Veltar was frantically consulting his device, cross-referencing data and running calculations. After several minutes, he looked up with an expression of growing amazement. High Counselor, if their claims about their species' age are accurate, and if they've truly survived for 200,000 years while developing at this pace. He paused, as if afraid to voice his conclusion. What is it, Veltar? Zara-TH demanded. If these claims are true, then, by the Council's own metrics for measuring species maturity, humans wouldn't be classified as a young species at all. They would be classified as one of the ancient races. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Zara-TH stared at her advisor as if he had just announced that the laws of physics had been repealed. That's impossible, she said finally. The ancient races transcended physical existence eons ago. No species remains in corporeal form for that length of time without either ascending or destroying themselves. Unless, Dr. Reeves said softly, they chose a different path entirely. Sarah leaned back in her chair, watching the aliens struggle with concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of galactic civilization. The meeting had taken an interesting turn, and she suspected it was about to become even more interesting. High Counselor, she said formally, I think we need to have a much longer conversation about what the Galactic Council considers maturity and what humanity has learned during our long journey through the stars. Zara looked around the room, taking in the faces of her advisors, the human delegation, and the displays still showing evidence of humanity's ancient and enduring civilization. For the first time since arriving at Earth, she looked genuinely uncertain about what she was dealing with. Captain Chun, she said slowly, I believe you may be right. This conversation has become far more significant than I anticipated. As the formal presentations concluded and the discussions moved into more detailed exchanges, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and concern. First contact was proving to be everything they had hoped for and more complicated than they had prepared for. The aliens' assumptions about humanity had been wrong, but that raised questions about their assumptions about the rest of the galaxy. What other misconceptions might they discover? And what would it mean for humanity's place in a galactic community that apparently hadn't encountered anything quite like them before? The answers to those questions would have to wait for tomorrow's meetings. But as Sarah watched the alien delegation prepare to return to their ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that this first contact was going to change everything for both species. High Counselor Zara stood in the observation deck of her ship, staring at the blue marble that was Earth while her mind raced through the implications of yesterday's meeting. Behind her, Scholar Veltar worked frantically at his research station, pulling up records from the Galactic Council's vast databases. The calculations are consistent across all models, Veltar announced, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. If the humans' claims about their species' longevity are accurate, they represent something we've never encountered before. Military Assessor Krindar paced the deck, his warrior's instincts clearly troubled by these revelations. A species that old should have conquered half the galaxy by now, or transcended physical existence entirely. Instead, they're confined to one planet, and barely beginning to explore space. It doesn't make sense. Zara turned from the viewport. Unless they chose to remain on their world for reasons we don't understand. The question is, why would an advanced species deliberately limit their expansion? Before anyone could answer, the communications array activated, and Captain Chen's voice filled the room. High Counselor Zara, thank you for yesterday's meeting. We've prepared additional information that might help clarify some of the questions that arose. Would you be willing to meet again today? Zara exchanged glances with her advisors. Captain Chen, we would welcome another meeting. However, I must inform you that I've contacted the Galactic Council to report our findings. They are most intrigued by our initial assessment. I understand, Sarah's voice replied. Perhaps today's discussion will provide them with more complete information to consider. 2 hours later, the alien delegation once again sat in the Prometheus's briefing room. But the atmosphere was markedly different. Gone was the casual condescension of the previous day, replaced by intense curiosity and barely concealed anxiety. Captain Sean, Zara began without preamble. Before we continue, I need you to understand the significance of what we discussed yesterday. The Galactic Council has protocols for dealing with different types of species. Young races are given guidance and protection. Advanced races are invited to join as equals. But ancient races. She paused, searching for the right words. Ancient races are approached with extreme caution and respect. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. Why is that? Scholar Veltar answered. Because ancient races, by definition, possess wisdom and capabilities that younger species cannot comprehend. Throughout galactic history, encounters with truly ancient civilizations have been transformative for all involved. Sometimes in positive ways, Krindar added grimly, sometimes not. Sarah nodded slowly. I see. And you're trying to determine which category humanity belongs to. Precisely, Zara confirmed. Your species presents a puzzle that challenges our understanding of galactic civilization. If you are truly as old as you claim, then why haven't you expanded beyond your star system? Why do you still engage in primitive behaviors like warfare and competition? Dr. Reeves activated the holographic display, which showed Earth from space. To understand humanity, you need to understand our relationship with our planet. Earth isn't just our home. It's our teacher, our laboratory, our proving ground. Images flowed across the display, vast forests, deep oceans, towering mountains, sprawling deserts. Then came images of human civilization integrated into these landscapes, cities that worked with natural water systems, agriculture that enhanced rather than depleted the soil, technology that complemented rather than dominated the environment. For 200,000 years, we've been learning how to live on Earth without destroying it, Sarah explained. Every mistake we made taught us something. Every success showed us a better way forward. But, surely, Veltar interjected, a species of your apparent age could have solved these problems millennia ago and moved on to explore other worlds. We could have, Dr. Reeves agreed. But we chose not to. The aliens stared at her in bewilderment. Zarth spoke first. Chose not to? Why would an advanced species choose to limit themselves? Sarah stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Because we learned something that perhaps other species haven't. We learned that running away from problems doesn't solve them. It just moves them to a new location. She turned back to face the alien delegation. Every species you've described followed the same pattern: rapid technological development, expansion into space, and then either transcendence or self-destruction. But what if there's a third path? What kind of third path? Krindar asked, his military mind struggling with the concept. The path of mastery, Sarah replied. Not mastery over other species or other worlds, but mastery over ourselves. Mastery of the art of sustainable civilization. Dr. Reeves pulled up new images, human societies from across history, showing the gradual development of increasingly sophisticated forms of cooperation and governance. We spent thousands of years learning how to organize ourselves, how to resolve conflicts without destroying everything we'd built, how to balance individual freedom with collective responsibility. But that's just basic social development, Veltar protested. Every species goes through that phase. Do they? Sarah asked quietly. Or do they skip past it in their rush to acquire advanced technology? She gestured to the display, which now showed graphs and charts depicting resource management, population dynamics, and environmental balance. We've learned to maintain stable populations without stagnation, to advance technology without destroying our environment, to compete without annihilating our competitors. You're describing a theoretical ideal, Zarth said, but her voice carried uncertainty. No species achieves perfect balance. Perfect? No, Dr. Reeves admitted. But stable enough to last for hundreds of thousands of years while continuing to grow and learn. That's what makes us different. Krindar leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You're claiming that humanity has achieved something that our military strategists would call impossible: sustainable warfare. Not sustainable warfare, Sarah corrected. Sustainable civilization that includes the capacity for conflict without total destruction. We fight, yes, but we also negotiate, trade, intermarry, and build together. Our conflicts rarely end in the complete annihilation of one side. Scholar Veltar was frantically taking notes. This is fascinating, but it raises disturbing questions about our assumptions regarding galactic development. If your model is correct, then every species that joins the Council by following the traditional path of rapid expansion is fundamentally unstable. Not unstable, Dr. Reeves said diplomatically, just following a different developmental strategy. Your approach prioritizes speed and efficiency. Ours prioritizes sustainability and resilience. Zarth stood and began pacing, her elegant composure finally showing cracks. Captain Chen, do you understand what you're suggesting? You're implying that the Galactic Council's entire framework for understanding civilization is flawed. Not flawed, Sarah replied carefully. Incomplete. Your framework works well for the types of species you've encountered. But perhaps there are other types that don't fit the same patterns. What other types? Veltar asked, his scholar's curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. Sarah and Dr. Reeves exchanged glances before Sarah answered. What if humanity isn't unique? What if there are other species that chose the long path, the careful path, the sustainable path? Species that your rapid expansion model never encountered because they didn't expand rapidly. The implications of this question hung in the air like a physical presence. Krindar was the first to voice what they were all thinking. You're suggesting there might be a galactic civilization of ancient races that the Council has never encountered because they don't advertise their presence. I'm not suggesting anything, Sarah said. I'm asking questions. But if such civilizations existed, how would you know? Your contact protocols are based on detecting energy signatures from advanced technology and rapid expansion. Species that develop along different paths might be invisible to your methods. Zara stopped pacing and stared at the human captain. Captain Chun, are you saying that humanity is in contact with other ancient races? No, Sarah replied honestly. We're saying that we've developed our civilization based on the assumption that we might not be alone in following this path, and that if we're not alone, we should be ready for contact when it comes. Dr. Reeves brought up a final set of images: human art, literature, philosophy, and music that dealt with themes of cosmic perspective, long-term thinking, and preparation for contact with other intelligences. Our culture has been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Not just technologically, but psychologically and philosophically. Preparing how? Beltar asked. By learning to think in cosmic timescales, Sarah explained. By developing ethical systems that can handle contact with radically different forms of life. By creating social structures that can adapt without losing their essential character. She paused, then continued. By becoming the kind of species that other ancient civilizations might actually want to meet. The briefing room fell silent as the aliens absorbed these ideas. Finally, Zaratage spoke, and her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Captain Chun, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Does humanity pose a threat to the Galactic Council? Sarah met her gaze steadily. High Counselor, humanity poses a threat only to assumptions that might need to be questioned. We have no desire to conquer, dominate, or destroy. We're interested in learning, growing, and contributing to the larger galactic community in whatever way proves most beneficial for everyone involved. But, Dr. Reeves added quietly, we also won't be patronized, dismissed, or treated as children. We're willing to be junior partners while we learn, but not subjects to be managed. Krindar smiled grimly. And that, right there, is exactly what I would expect from an ancient race that has spent millennia learning to balance strength with wisdom. Zaratich nodded slowly. Captain Chun, I'm going to need to have a very long conversation with the Galactic Council. What you've shared with us today challenges some of our most fundamental assumptions about civilization and development. What will you tell them? Sarah asked. The truth, Zaratich replied. That we may have encountered something unprecedented. An ancient race that chose to remain hidden not out of fear or arrogance, but out of wisdom. A species that has been quietly perfecting the art of sustainable civilization while the rest of the galaxy has been rushing toward transcendence or destruction. She paused, then added, and that the Council needs to be very careful about how we proceed from here. As the alien delegation prepared to leave, Scholar Veltar approached Dr. Reeves with obvious excitement. Dr. Reeves, would you be willing to share some of humanity's historical records with our scholars? If your civilization is indeed as old and stable as you claim, your developmental data could revolutionize our understanding of social evolution. Of course, Dr. Reeves replied. But I should warn you, human history is messy, contradictory, and full of apparent paradoxes. We've never been a simple species to understand. The most interesting subjects never are, Veltar replied with the first genuine smile any of the aliens had shown. As the airlock sealed behind the departing delegation, Sarah turned to Dr. Reeves. Well, that was interesting. Think they believed us. They're starting to, Dr. Reeves replied. But I suspect the real test is yet to come. If the Galactic Council decides to treat us as an ancient race, everything changes. How so? Ancient races aren't evaluated for membership in the Council, Dr. Reeves explained. They're consulted as equals and sometimes asked to serve as advisors or mediators. If that's the path this leads down, humanity might find itself in a very different position than we expected. Sarah looked out at the alien ship, noting the increased activity around its communication arrays. They're talking to their council right now, aren't they? Almost certainly. And based on what we've shared, those are going to be some very interesting conversations. As Sarah watched, she couldn't help but wonder what the Galactic Council would make of humanity's claims. Would they accept that a species could choose the slow path to wisdom? Would they understand that strength sometimes meant knowing when not to use force? And, most importantly, would they be willing to question their own assumptions about what civilization looked like when it matured? The next few days would determine not just humanity's relationship with the galaxy, but potentially the galaxy's understanding of itself. The call came at 0300 ship time, dragging Captain Sarah Chun from a restless sleep. Emergency lighting bathed her quarters in amber as she reached for her communicator. "Captain, we have a situation," came Lieutenant Martinez's urgent voice. "Multiple ships have just dropped out of hyperspace. Big ones." Sarah was pulling on her uniform before Martinez finished speaking. "How many ships?" 12 confirmed, possibly more incoming. "They're maintaining position at the edge of the system. But, Captain, the energy readings are off the charts." Sarah ran through the corridors, her mind racing. The Galactic Council had responded faster than expected, and in much greater force. As she stepped onto the bridge, the main display showed a formation that made her breath catch in her throat. 12 massive vessels hung in space like sleeping titans, each one larger than the Valdrani ship that had first made contact. But more impressive than their size was their obvious diversity. No two ships shared the same design philosophy, suggesting they represented different species, different civilizations. "Captain Dr. Reeves called from her station. "I'm reading at least 6 distinct technological signatures. These ships represent multiple species working together. Any communications?" "Not yet," Martinez replied. "They're just waiting." Sarah studied the formation, noting the precise spacing and coordinated positioning. "They're not here to attack. This is a formal delegation. Dr. Reeves, any chance you can identify the species based on ship designs?" "Working on it," Dr. Reeves replied, her fingers flying across her console. "I'm cross-referencing with the Valdrani database they shared yesterday. These definitely include council member species, but some of these designs are completely new to me." The communications array suddenly came alive, and High Counselor Zarth's familiar voice filled the bridge. "Captain Chun, I hope you are prepared for visitors. The Galactic Council has decided to convene an emergency session to address your species' claims." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "High Counselor, that's quite a response force for a diplomatic meeting. Captain, please understand. If humanity is truly an ancient race, this represents the most significant development in galactic history for over 50,000 years. The Council has dispatched representatives from 12 member species, including some of our most senior leaders. And if we're not what we claim to be?" Sarah asked quietly. There was a long pause before Zarth answered. "Then, we have a very different problem to address." Sarah looked around her bridge crew, seeing her own concerns reflected in their faces. "How would the Council like to proceed?" "The senior representatives will board your vessel for formal evaluation. Captain Chun, I must warn you, these are not the curious diplomats you met yesterday. These individuals have the authority to make binding decisions about humanity's status and future." "Understood. How long do we have to prepare?" "The shuttle launches in 1 hour." After the communication ended, Sarah gathered her senior staff in the briefing room. The same room where they had made first contact now felt like the site of an impending trial. "All right, people," Sarah began. "We're about to undergo what sounds like the galactic equivalent of a final exam. Dr. Reeves, what do we know about council evaluation procedures for ancient races?" Dr. Reeves consulted her notes from the previous day's meetings. "Very little, Captain. According to the Valdrani, it's been 50,000 years since they've encountered a potential ancient race. The protocols they mentioned are mostly theoretical." "That's both good and bad," Sarah mused. "Good because they don't have a script to follow. Bad because we don't know what to expect." Chief Engineer Rodriguez spoke up from the back of the room. "Captain, I've been thinking about what the aliens said yesterday. They seem to judge maturity based on technological advancement and expansion. But what if they test us differently because they think we're ancient?" "How do you mean?" "Well, if they believe we've had hundreds of thousands of years to develop, they might expect us to demonstrate wisdom rather than just technology. They might test our judgment, our ethics, our long-term thinking." Sarah nodded slowly. "That makes sense. An ancient species would have had time to make every possible mistake and learn from it. They'd expect us to demonstrate that kind of deep wisdom. The question is," Dr. Reeves added, What kind of test would reveal that wisdom? Before anyone could answer, Martinez's voice came over the intercom. Captain, the Council shuttle has launched. ETA in 30 minutes. Sarah stood. All right, everyone. We've represented humanity well so far. Let's continue to do so. Remember, we're not trying to impress them with our technology. We're trying to show them who we are as a people. 30 minutes later, Sarah stood in the docking bay watching as the Council shuttle approached. Unlike the elegant Valdrani craft, this vessel was clearly built for function over form. Its hull was scarred and practical, suggesting it had seen considerable use. The shuttle docked with minimal ceremony, and the airlock cycled open to reveal 5 figures. Sarah recognized Zara-Th immediately, but the others were clearly from different species. One was tall and crystalline, almost translucent. Another appeared to be made of living metal. A third resembled a massive bear covered in feathers. The fourth was humanoid, but moved with the fluid grace of something aquatic. The fifth was so heavily robed that Sarah couldn't determine anything about their physical form. Zara-Th stepped forward and performed a formal bow. Captain Shun, may I present the Emergency Evaluation Committee of the Galactic Council. I am here as your sponsor and advocate. The crystalline being spoke next, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I am Quiltra of the Resonant Collective. I serve as the Council's specialist in ancient civilizations and long-term cultural development. The metallic figure's voice was deep and resonant. I am Forgemind Caxhan of the Eternal Engines. My people are responsible for evaluating technological philosophy and development patterns. The bear-like creature's voice was surprisingly melodious. High Shaman Velnara of the Windsingers. We study wisdom traditions and ethical evolution. The aquatic being flowed forward. Current Rider Sylphon of the Deep Reaches. I evaluate social structures and governance systems. The robed figure remained silent, and Zara-Th explained. The fifth member serves as an observer only and does not speak during evaluations. Sarah bowed respectfully to each being. Welcome aboard the Prometheus. We're honored by your presence and ready to assist with your evaluation in any way possible. Quiltra stepped forward, its crystalline structure catching and refracting the light in mesmerizing patterns. Captain Shun, before we begin, you must understand that this evaluation will be unlike anything your species has experienced. We are not here to test your technology or military capabilities. We are here to determine whether humanity possesses the wisdom characteristic of an ancient race. What does that entail? Sarah asked. Questions that cannot be answered with data or demonstrations, Velnara explained. Challenges that reveal character rather than capability. Ancient races are defined not by what they can do, but by what they choose to do. Sylphon flowed closer, its form rippling like water. We will present you with scenarios that test your species' judgment. How you respond will determine not only your classification, but your future relationship with the galactic community. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. I understand. How would you like to proceed? Caxhan's metallic voice carried a note of approval. Your immediate concern for proper procedure is noted. Ancient races understand the importance of framework and protocol. We will conduct 3 evaluations: wisdom and conflict resolution, judgment and resource allocation, and vision for long-term development. They moved to the briefing room, where the evaluation committee arranged themselves around the table. Zara-Th took a seat off to the side, her role as advocate limiting her participation. Quiltra began. Captain Shun, we will present you with a scenario. You will have time to consider your response. But remember, we are not looking for the correct answer. We are looking for an answer that demonstrates the kind of thinking we would expect from an ancient race. Sarah nodded, feeling Dr. Reeves and her other officers standing behind her in support. The scenario, Quiltra continued, involves first contact between 2 species. Species A is technologically advanced, but culturally rigid. They have powerful weapons, but limited resources. Species B is less advanced technologically, but highly adaptable. They have abundant resources, but weaker defenses. Both species have legitimate claims to a star system that contains rare minerals essential for both their civilizations to survive. Direct conflict would likely result in the destruction of one or both species. How would an ancient race advise these species to resolve their conflict? Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, considering the scenario. The room was completely silent, allowing her to think without pressure or distraction. Finally, she spoke. The scenario presents a false choice. Both species are thinking in terms of scarcity and competition when they should be thinking in terms of abundance and cooperation. An ancient race would help them see that their apparent weaknesses are actually complementary strengths. Explain, Velnara requested. Species A has advanced technology but limited resources. Species B has abundant resources but needs technological advancement. Rather than fighting over the star system, they should be working together to develop it. Species A provides the technology to efficiently extract and process the minerals. Species B provides the raw materials and labor force. Both species benefit more from cooperation than either would from conquest. But, Caxhun interjected, what if the species are culturally incompatible? What if their fundamental values make cooperation impossible? Sarah smiled. Then, an ancient race would help them find common ground that transcends their cultural differences. Every species wants to survive and thrive. Every species wants their children to have a better future. Those are universal values that can form the foundation for cooperation, even between very different cultures. And if they refuse to cooperate? Sylphon asked. Then, an ancient race would be patient, Sarah replied. We would offer alternatives, propose compromises, and wait for them to recognize that cooperation serves their interests better than conflict. Ancient races understand that true solutions take time to develop and accept. Quiltra's crystalline structure pulsed with what might have been approval. Interesting. Your response demonstrates several characteristics we associate with ancient wisdom: systems thinking, patience, focus on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. The second test came from Caxhun. Resource allocation scenario. Your species has developed a technology that could solve energy problems throughout the galaxy. However, sharing this technology freely would eliminate your competitive advantage and potentially destabilize existing power structures. Restricting it preserves your position, but allows suffering to continue. How does an ancient race handle this dilemma? This question struck closer to home, and Sarah took even more time to consider her response. An ancient race understands that true security comes not from maintaining advantages over others, but from creating systems that benefit everyone. We would share the technology, but we would do it gradually and carefully. Carefully how? Velnara asked. By working with existing power structures to ensure the transition doesn't create chaos. By providing the technology first to species that would use it responsibly and could help others adapt. By creating educational and support systems to help all species implement the technology safely. But this approach might take centuries, Sylphon pointed out. Many beings would suffer while you implemented your gradual approach. Sarah nodded. Yes, some beings would suffer. But hasty implementation would likely cause even more suffering through economic collapse, social disruption, and potential conflicts over the new technology. An ancient race accepts the responsibility of making difficult choices that serve the long-term good, even when they cause short-term pain. And if some species refuse to accept your gradual approach and demanded immediate access? Caxhun pressed. Then, we would respect their choice and provide the technology immediately to those who requested it, while continuing to offer support and guidance to help them implement it successfully. Ancient races understand that wisdom cannot be imposed, only offered. The final test came from Sylphon. Long-term vision scenario. Your species is offered membership in a galactic confederation with significant benefits, but joining requires you to abandon certain unique aspects of your culture and adopt standardized practices. How does an ancient race respond to this choice? Sarah didn't hesitate with this answer. We would decline membership under those terms. The evaluation committee exchanged glances, and Quiltra asked, why? The benefits of membership might far outweigh the cultural losses. Because an ancient race understands that diversity is the source of strength in any system. By abandoning our unique perspectives and practices, we would be diminishing the potential of the Confederation as a whole. True membership means contributing our uniqueness, not surrendering it. But What if your refusal to conform created tensions with other member species? Velnara asked. Then, we would work to find ways to bridge those differences without eliminating them. Ancient races serve as examples of alternative approaches to common challenges. Our value to the Confederation lies precisely in our willingness to maintain different perspectives. And, if the Confederation ultimately rejected you because of your refusal to conform, Sylphon pressed, then we would continue to develop our own path, while remaining open to future contact when the Confederation was ready to appreciate diversity rather than fear it. Ancient races understand that some relationships take time to mature. The room fell silent as the evaluation committee considered Sarah's responses. Finally, Quiltra spoke. Captain Shun, your responses demonstrate several characteristics consistent with ancient race thinking: long-term perspective, systems thinking, emphasis on cooperation over competition, respect for diversity, and patience with gradual progress. However, we have one final question. Sarah waited. If the Galactic Council determined that humanity was indeed an ancient race, would you be willing to serve as advisors and mediators for younger species? Sarah looked back at her crew, then at the alien beings who held her species' future in their hands. High Council representatives, humanity would be honored to serve in whatever capacity would be most beneficial for the galactic community. We've spent hundreds of thousands of years learning to live together on one world. If that experience can help other species navigate their own challenges, we would consider it our privilege to share what we've learned. The evaluation committee rose and moved to the far corner of the room for a private consultation. Sarah could hear the sound of their discussion, but couldn't make out specific words. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they returned to the table. Quiltra spoke for the group. Captain Shun, the evaluation committee has reached a unanimous decision. Based on your responses and your species' demonstrated characteristics, we recommend that the Galactic Council classify humanity as an ancient race and extend an invitation to join the Council as senior advisors. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief, but Quiltra wasn't finished. However, this recommendation comes with conditions. Humanity must be willing to share your developmental model with other species. You must serve as mediators in conflicts between younger species. And you must accept the responsibility that comes with being recognized as an ancient race. What responsibility is that? Sarah asked. The responsibility, Velnara explained, of helping the galaxy grow up. The Galactic Council chamber was unlike anything Captain Sarah Chun had imagined. Rather than the sterile meeting room she had expected, the space resembled an amphitheater carved from living crystal, with representatives from hundreds of species arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Sarah stood with Dr. Reeves and the rest of her delegation in a designated area near the platform, watching as beings of every conceivable shape and form took their places. The diversity was overwhelming. Crystalline entities that sang to each other in harmonious tones, gaseous beings contained within environmental suits, creatures that seemed to be made of living light, and dozens of more conventional biological species. Captain, Dr. Reeves whispered, I'm reading energy signatures from species we've never encountered before. Some of these beings are using technologies I can't even begin to understand. High Counselor Zara Th approached their group, her expression grave. Captain Chun, before the session begins, there's something you need to know. The decision to classify humanity as an ancient race has created significant controversy within the Council. What kind of controversy? Sarah asked. Many Council members believe that a species confined to a single planet cannot possibly be classified as ancient. Others argue that your developmental model represents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of civilization itself. The debate has been intense. Sarah nodded, having expected this reaction. And now they want to hear from us directly. Exactly. You'll have the opportunity to address the full Council and answer their questions. But, Captain, Zara Th's voice carried a warning. Some of these beings are far older and more powerful than anyone you've encountered so far. They will not be impressed by diplomatic courtesy alone. A resonant tone filled the chamber, and all conversation ceased. A figure materialized on the central platform, not walking onto it, simply appearing as if stepping from another dimension. The being was tall, and luminous, its form shifting between states of matter like controlled aurora. I am Prime Counselor Luxandra. The being spoke without moving what might have been a mouth, its voice somehow reaching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. We convene this emergency session to address the petition regarding the species designated as humanity and their claimed status as an ancient race. The Prime Counselor's attention focused on Sarah's group. Representatives of humanity approached the speaking platform. Sarah led her delegation down to the central platform, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon them. As they took their positions, Prime Counselor Luxandra continued. The evaluation committee has presented compelling evidence for your species reclassification. However, many council members have concerns about this recommendation. You will have the opportunity to address these concerns directly. A new voice spoke from the assembled delegates, this one sharp and clearly skeptical. Prime Counselor, with respect, how can a species that has never left their home star system be considered ancient? The Zephyrian Empire has expanded across 12 sectors in the time these humans claim to have existed. Sarah looked toward the speaker, an insectoid being with iridescent wing cases and compound eyes. Ambassador, may I ask how long the Zephyrian Empire has existed? 15,000 years, came the proud reply. And, in those 15,000 years, how many civilizations has your empire encountered that were older than you? Several, but they had all transcended physical existence or destroyed themselves. That is the natural progression of advanced civilizations. Sarah nodded. And what if there was a different progression? What if some civilizations chose to perfect sustainability rather than pursue transcendence? A new voice joined the conversation, this one from a being that appeared to be made of liquid mercury. The flowing collective agrees with the Zephyrian position. Expansion and exploration are fundamental characteristics of intelligent life. A species that chooses to remain on one world has stagnated. Dr. Reeves stepped forward. Council members, with respect, I think you may be confusing activity with progress. Human civilization has never stopped growing and learning. We've simply chosen to grow in depth rather than breadth. Explain, demanded another voice from the assembly. We've spent 200,000 years learning to manage complex systems, planetary ecosystems, diverse societies, sustainable technologies. These skills transfer to galactic-scale challenges, but they require deep understanding that can only come from long experience. A being that looked like a walking constellation of stars spoke next. But surely such long development would produce technologies far beyond what you've demonstrated. The stellar architects achieved transcendence in half that time. Sarah smiled. And where are the stellar architects now? They ascended to higher dimensions of existence. The star being replied. Exactly. They left. But what if the galaxy needs civilizations that choose to stay and help? Prime Counselor Luxandra's form pulsed with interest. Elaborate on this concept. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing she was about to reveal something humanity had been carefully considering for centuries. Council members, what if the pattern you've observed, rapid expansion followed by transcendence or destruction, isn't the only path for advanced civilizations? What if some species choose to serve as gardeners rather than explorers? Gardeners. The Zephyrian ambassador sounded confused. Species that dedicate themselves to nurturing the development of younger civilizations. Species that provide stability, wisdom, and guidance while others explore and expand. Sarah paused, looking around the chamber. Species that choose to be the foundation upon which galactic civilization can safely grow. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates debated this concept among themselves. Prime Counselor Luxandra raised a hand for silence. This is an interesting theory, but do you have evidence that such gardener species exist? Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Reeves, then made a decision that would change everything. Prime Counselor, we have more than evidence. We have experience. The chamber fell completely silent. What do you mean by experience? Luxandra asked carefully. We mean that humanity is not the first ancient race to follow this development path. We've been in contact with others like us for over 3,000 years. The silence that followed this statement was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, the Zephyrian ambassador spoke in a voice filled with disbelief. You're claiming there are other ancient races that the Council has never detected? Not detected, Dr. Reeves confirmed. They've been choosing to remain hidden until the galaxy was ready for contact. How many? Prime Counselor Luxandra's question carried the weight of cosmic significance. Sarah looked around the chamber one final time, then answered. 17 species that we know of. Possibly more. The chamber exploded in chaos. Delegates shouted questions, accusations, and demands in dozens of languages. Energy fields flared as various species activated defensive protocols. Prime Counselor Luxandra's form blazed with increased luminosity as they called for order. Silence. The Prime Counselor's mental command cut through every mind in the chamber like a blade. When order was restored, Luxandra continued. Representatives of humanity, you are claiming that there exists a hidden galactic civilization of ancient races? Not hidden, Sarah corrected. Quiet. We've been watching, learning, and occasionally helping, but we haven't revealed ourselves because the galactic community wasn't ready. Ready for what? Demanded the Mercury being. Ready to accept that there might be other ways to approach civilization. Ready to question whether expansion and transcendence are the only paths to advancement. Ready to consider that wisdom might be more valuable than power. A new voice spoke from a section of the chamber Sarah hadn't noticed before. It was gentle, melodic, and carried an undertone of vast age. Prime Counselor, perhaps it is time for us to speak directly. Every being in the chamber turned toward the source of the voice. In an area that had appeared empty moments before, figures were becoming visible. Not materializing like energy beings, not walking in like physical creatures, simply becoming apparent as if they had been there all along but hidden from perception. Sarah recognized the lead figure immediately from the descriptions in humanity's most ancient and secret records. Tall, graceful, with skin that seemed to contain starlight and eyes that held the depth of cosmic time. I am Keeper Nalthara of the Eternal Watchers, the being said. We are one of the species that young humanity speaks of. Prime Counselor Luxandra's form flickered with what might have been shock. The Eternal Watchers are myth. Legend. You vanished from the galaxy 50,000 years ago. We did not vanish, Nalthara replied gently. We chose to step back and observe, to let younger species find their own paths while we learn to be better guides and teachers. More figures appeared throughout the chamber as other hidden species revealed themselves. Sarah saw beings of incredible beauty and obvious age, each one radiating an aura of deep wisdom and patient strength. For 50,000 years, Nalthara continued, we have watched the Galactic Council grow and develop. We have seen species rise to greatness and fall to hubris. We have occasionally offered subtle guidance, but we have not interfered directly. Why? The question came from dozens of delegates simultaneously. Because interference, even well-intentioned interference, stunts growth. Young species must be allowed to make their own mistakes, fight their own battles, and find their own wisdom. Our role is to be available when true guidance is needed, not to control or dominate. The Zephyrian ambassador found his voice. But why reveal yourselves now? Keeper Nalthara looked directly at Sarah before answering. Because humanity has achieved something remarkable. They have developed along the ancient path while remaining connected to the galactic community. They can serve as a bridge between our hidden civilization and your expanding one. Dr. Reeves stepped forward. Council members, this is why humanity's classification matters. We're not just another species seeking membership. We're offering to serve as ambassadors between two very different approaches to galactic civilization. Prime Counselor Luxandra's form had stabilized, but their voice carried new uncertainty. What are you proposing? Sarah took a deep breath. We're proposing that it's time for the galaxy to grow up. Time to move beyond the cycle of expansion and transcendence. Time to learn that sustainable civilization is possible, that wisdom can be more powerful than technology, and that the true measure of advancement is not how fast you can spread across the stars, but how well you can nurture life wherever you find it. Keeper Nalthara nodded approvingly. The young captain speaks wisdom beyond her years. Humanity offers the Council something we could not, the perspective of a species that chose the ancient path while remaining engaged with galactic affairs. But what does this mean for the Council? Asked the Mercury being, its voice carrying a note of fear. It means evolution, Sarah replied. Not revolution, not destruction, but growth. The Council's current model works well for exploration and expansion. But as the galaxy becomes more crowded, as resources become more precious, as conflicts become more complex, you'll need new approaches. The ancient path offers those approaches, Thera added. Conflict resolution based on long-term thinking. Resource management based on sustainability rather than exploitation. Governance based on wisdom rather than power. We will reconvene in one galactic standard cycle to vote on humanity's proposal. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Keeper Thera approached Sarah's group. Captain Chun, you and your species have done well. You have opened a door that has been closed for 50,000 years. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now the galaxy decides whether it's ready to take the next step in its evolution. Whether it's ready to learn that growing up sometimes means slowing down, going deeper, and choosing wisdom over power. Thera paused, then added, but regardless of what the Council decides, humanity has already achieved something remarkable. You have proven that the ancient path is not only possible, but viable in the modern galaxy. That alone will change everything. As the chamber emptied and Sarah's delegation prepared to return to their ship, she couldn't help but feel that they had just participated in a moment that would be remembered for millennia. The galaxy was about to discover that growing up might be the greatest adventure of all. 1 year after the Council vote, Captain Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar embassy, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive for the inaugural wisdom exchange. The space station orbited at the edge of Earth's solar system, serving as a neutral meeting ground between the expanding civilizations of the Council and the ancient species who had finally emerged from hiding. The diversity is incredible, Dr. Reeves commented, joining Sarah at the viewport. 12 Council species and 8 ancient races, all working together on sustainability projects. Sarah nodded, watching a sleek Zephyrian research vessel dock alongside a living ship from the Eternal Watchers. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago, when the galaxy operated under the assumption that expansion and transcendence were the only paths forward. Ambassador Chun, you're needed in Conference Room Alpha, came a voice over the intercom. Sarah smiled at the title, still getting used to being humanity's first ambassador to both the Galactic Council and the Ancient Alliance. The conference room buzzed with activity as representatives from multiple species worked together on their latest project, developing sustainable terraforming techniques that enhanced rather than replaced existing ecosystems. It was exactly the kind of long-term, wisdom-based approach that the ancient races had spent millennia perfecting. High Counselor Zarath looked up as Sarah entered. Over the past year, the Valdrani leader had become one of humanity's closest allies in bridging the gap between the two galactic civilizations. Sarah, we need your input on the Kepler 442 proposal, Zarath said, using the informal address that had become common among the working groups. The Zephyrians want to establish a colony there, but the ancient races are concerned about the impact on the native ecosystem. Sarah reviewed the holographic display showing the planet in question. Kepler 442 was rich in resources but also home to a complex web of non-intelligent life that had been developing for millions of years. What does the ecosystem survey show? Sarah asked. Scholar Veltar, now serving as the Valdrani representative to the Wisdom Exchange, activated additional displays. The planet has 3 distinct biomes that support over 2 million species. Conventional colonization would require clearing approximately 40% of the surface area. And the Zephyrian position? Ambassador Rixtau of the Zephyrian Empire stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic light. Over the past year, the former skeptic had become one of the most enthusiastic advocates for the new collaborative approach. We need the rare earth minerals to support our expanding population, he explained. But we're willing to use the ancient techniques if they can give us access to the resources without destroying the ecosystem. Sarah turned to Keeper Thera, who had become the primary liaison between the ancient races and the Council. What do the Watchers recommend? Patience, Thera replied with a gentle smile. The planet can support both the native ecosystem and resource extraction, but it requires a fundamentally different approach than conventional colonization. How different? Rixtal asked. Instead of imposing your technology on the planet, you adapt your needs to work with existing systems. Instead of clearing land for surface colonies, you build underground cities that follow natural cave networks. Instead of strip mining, you develop biological extraction methods that use native organisms to concentrate minerals. Sarah could see the Zephyrian ambassador struggling with the concept. But that would take decades to develop and implement. Yes, Thera agreed. And it would create a sustainable colony that could last for millions of years without depleting the planet's resources or destroying its native life. The immediate need remains, Rixtal pointed out, though his tone was more thoughtful than argumentative. Sarah stepped forward. What if we split the approach? Some of your immediate needs could be met through asteroid mining in the same system, while we develop the long-term biological extraction methods for the planet itself. Dr. Reeves pulled up additional data. The asteroid belt in that system contains sufficient rare earth materials to meet Zephyrian needs for at least 50 years. That would give us time to develop and test the biological methods. And if the biological methods prove more efficient than conventional mining, Zarth asked, then we'll have developed a new model that other species can use, Sarah replied. A model that increases resource availability while preserving ecosystems. The room fell silent as the representatives considered this approach. Finally, Rixtal spoke. 1 year ago, I would have dismissed this as impossibly slow and inefficient. But the projects we've completed here have taught me that sometimes the slower path leads to better destinations. What do you mean? Beltar asked. The atmospheric processors we developed using ancient techniques take 3 times longer to terraform a planet than our old methods. But they create stable, self-maintaining ecosystems instead of artificial environments that require constant technological support. Keeper Thera nodded approvingly. You are beginning to understand the difference between quick solutions and lasting solutions. Over the following hours, the working group developed a comprehensive plan for the Kepler 442 system that incorporated both immediate and long-term approaches. It was the kind of collaborative problem-solving that had become the hallmark of the wisdom exchange. As the meeting concluded, Sarah found herself walking with Thera through the station's arboretum, a living space that demonstrated the integration of technology and biology that the ancient races had mastered. The progress has been remarkable, Thera commented, watching a Zephyrian researcher work alongside an eternal watcher to develop new plant species. When we first revealed ourselves, many of us doubted that the younger species would be willing to embrace ancient wisdom. And now? Sarah asked. Now I see species that are genuinely excited to learn new approaches to old problems. The Zephyrians have become particularly enthusiastic about biological technology. The Valdrani are pioneering new forms of democratic governance based on ancient consensus methods. Even the most militaristic species are finding value in conflict resolution techniques that build lasting peace rather than temporary victories. Sarah smiled. It's not perfect. Some species are still skeptical, and progress is slower than many would like. Perfection was never the goal, Thera replied. Growth was the goal, and growth is happening throughout the galaxy. They paused at an observation window overlooking the station's central plaza, where beings from dozens of species worked, learned, and socialized together. The site represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Cooperation between civilizations separated by hundreds of thousands of years of development. There's something I've been curious about, Sarah said. Why did the ancient races choose to reveal themselves when they did? You could have remained hidden for millennia longer. Thera considered the question carefully before answering. Because hiding was no longer serving the galaxy's needs. The rapid expansion model that has dominated galactic civilization for millions of years is approaching its limits. Resources are becoming scarcer, conflicts more frequent, and the margin for error smaller. The galaxy needed new approaches before it reached a crisis point. And humanity provided the catalyst? Humanity provided proof that ancient wisdom could coexist with modern challenges. Your species demonstrated that it was possible to be both ancient and engaged, wise and ambitious, patient and effective. Sarah looked out at the bustling plaza again. What do you think the galaxy will look like in another 1,000 years? Different, Nalthara replied with certainty. The current model of expansion and transcendence will continue, but it will be balanced by species that choose the path of sustainable development. Conflicts will be resolved through wisdom rather than force. Resources will be managed for long-term abundance rather than short-term profit. And beyond that, perhaps the galaxy will be ready for its next great evolution. Not transcendence to higher dimensions, but integration of all wisdom traditions into something greater than any species has achieved alone. As they spoke, Sarah noticed a commotion in the plaza below. A group of young beings from various species had gathered around a holographic display showing the latest results from the wisdom exchange projects. Their excitement was palpable as they discussed the implications of biological mining, ecosystem-integrated cities, and millennium-scale planning. "Look at them," Sarah said with satisfaction. "The next generation is growing up with both expansion and wisdom traditions. They'll create approaches we can't even imagine." Indeed, Nalthara agreed. They are the true fruit of this cooperation. Beings who see no contradiction between exploring the stars and nurturing the worlds they find, between individual achievement and collective wisdom, between progress and sustainability. A chime sounded through the station, indicating the start of the evening's cultural exchange. Tonight, the Winzingers would share their oral traditions while the stellar cartographers demonstrated their latest navigation techniques. "Shall we join them?" Sarah asked. "Of course. These exchanges are perhaps the most important work we do here. Technology can be shared through databases, but wisdom must be experienced to be truly understood." As they walked toward the cultural center, Sarah reflected on the year that had passed and the changes it had brought. The Galactic Council had not abandoned expansion. New colonies were still being established, new territories explored, new species contacted. But now these activities were balanced by a deeper understanding of sustainability, long-term thinking, and the value of patience. The ancient races had not abandoned their wisdom traditions. They continued to perfect the arts of sustainable civilization, conflict resolution, and deep ecological integration. But now they were actively sharing their knowledge with species eager to learn. And humanity had found its place as the bridge between these worlds, demonstrating that ancient wisdom and modern ambition could work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Ambassador Chun called Dr. Reeves as they entered the cultural center. "The Earth Council wants a status report on the terraforming project." Sarah smiled. Even as humanity took its place among the stars, Earth remained the center of their civilization, not as a limitation, but as a foundation. The planet that had taught humanity patience, sustainability, and the art of living together continued to serve as their teacher and guide. "Tell them the project is proceeding exactly as planned," Sarah replied. Slowly, carefully, and with full consideration for all life involved. It was, she realized, the most human answer she could give. And in a galaxy learning to value wisdom alongside ambition, it was exactly the right approach. As the evening's cultural exchange began, beings from across the galaxy gathered to share stories, songs, and knowledge that spanned millennia. In the background, ships continued to arrive and depart, carrying the fruits of collaboration to worlds throughout known space. The galaxy was growing up, and humanity had helped show it the way.